Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. This is Lloyd speaking. So let's, without further ado, get into today's session. Now, last week actually, uh, what I shared with you all was the indicator for support and resistance. Yeah. So this week I actually shared something similar, which is the supply and demand zone. So let me share screens. So here it is. So as you can see, supply and demand, let's take it straight from the start. Is there really any difference between supply and demand as far as resistance? Personally, to me, I don't really see that as having a huge difference. To me, uh, I I still trade from these areas. Yeah, probably the biggest difference to me in the way that when I get actually introduced to supply and demand is that support and resistance to some traders are really just one line. Yeah, so it can be so that people will say that this is where I'll be trading from. Yeah. So supply and demand is really a zone, as you can see on my screen. Yeah. So fundamentally, to some who trade supply and demand, they will say that it is an area whereby if it's on a downtrend, then when price comes to an area, it is whereby instead of working like a support resistance, whereby you can see price immediately flip, you will see that price actually starts to accumulate positions and reverses. Yeah. So now I think that might sound a bit confusing, but really want to just look at it this way: supply and demand. If you're really wants to trade it, I would say for now treat it as the same as supply and resistance. Not much difference, except that instead of drawing a line, you're practically drawing a zones. Yeah. And to me, if I do, sometimes you can see that I share the charts on the Telegram channel. Is that the areas that I draw is also a thin zone per se, but usually I draw at a week. Yeah, because one of the major way I change the way I look at the market is that really you can't say that price when it comes to a line, it will crooked line. When it comes to a line, it will actually immediately flip. That doesn't really work in that manner. Yeah. So instead, it's much easier if you draw it in a zone which encompasses the weeks. Because really, why is a wick there? I cannot explain to you. But I would just probably interpret that this is where the wick is present, then there are probably a lot of buyers or sellers in that area which is strong enough to actually flip the price. Yeah, so you actually flip once, then it might actually flip the second time. Yeah, where price will actually reverses, it does not simply reverses due to a line. Yeah, so an area might probably be better represented to indicate there is some resistance or support in that area. Yeah. So I no longer use a line per se, but an area will be much more well represented. Yeah. So I think it gets a bit blur, the line. So to me, again, I emphasize, personally to me, I'm not a purist of support resistance or supply and demand. I use both interchangeably. Yeah. And really, when it comes down to it, I will only use supply and demand zones in the daily chart because I think that's where the stronger is. And I think that's possibly where, if I were to trade reversal, that's where it starts to appear. Now, let me see. So the trouble mic will actually place the link for the indicator. So you'll be, as usual, my Google link. Now, so what I've shared this time now is actually its name as the supply and resistance demand zone button. Let me get rid of that. Let me go through what it implements. So once you put it on the screen, this is what you can see. Yeah. So first thing, you have to see force time frame. By 0, it means that whatever time frame you're on, it will be in the time frame. Yeah. So let's say I can put a 1440. Then it will forever be showing the daily time frame supply and resistance. Okay, the box that's been drawn here. So if I change to H4 chart, I will also only be looking at it daily time frame. Yeah, and this is particularly useful. Really, supply demand, again, I emphasize, is the strongest on the daily time frame. On the lower time frame, I don't think it's as good. Yeah, because I really treat supply demand zone as the reversal area. Yeah, so that's why I only trade from the daily time frame. Now let's look at the other settings. When you put it on, I also use narrow bands. Yeah, so if I don't check that, let me see, on daily chart here, So you can see this huge box on the below, right? So if I don't check that, it actually encompasses the whole candle. So I prefer a narrow band. So when you put it through, it only highlights the wick of the candle. As you can see, it actually becomes smaller on the daily time frame. Right. The third option that I changed really is a rectangle fill. Originally it's false, I change it to true. There, the color starts to appear. Yeah. So I only change these three options, the rest I actually leave it as it is. Yeah. So now supply and demand zones actually redraws. Yeah. So this indicator, once you see the box here, it is not fixed. It does redraw. All right. As with support and resistance, I'm going to use this two interchangeably. Support and resistance lines are not, even as traders, if you do draw your line manually, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, sorry. So I thought I was not sharing the video, sorry. Yeah. So these lines, these zones actually withdraw, it is not fixed there permanently. In that case, in that sense, it's nearly impossible to actually backtest with supply and demand. Same thing is nearly impossible to backtest with supply and resistance, since both indicators actually withdraws itself. Yeah. But I'm just going to give you an idea how this indicator works. I mean, there is a way to backtest, because it's extremely tough. Yeah. So let me change to this. All right. Let me shift this box away. So you can see that this is still the same indicator, supply and resistance, demand. So that this particular EA actually enables me to click bar by bar and let you all see how this indicator actually functions. So cool, right? So you can see that the box, once it's there, right, it will appear and disappear depending on price itself. Oh, let me change the background color. It's supposed to show text. All right, so you can have a rough idea of how this indicator actually works already. And one of the ways which I would advise, my personal experience is that how to trade supply demand zone is that the first time it appears, it's impossible to trade it. Forget it. Yeah. But you can actually trade the retest. So in some regards, you can if price actually goes up and down, and some would see it as a double bottom or double top, that is when you can start to trade the supply demand zone. That'd be an interesting way to trade. That's the first method to trade it. Like what you can see here. Let me just reverse the spill bar. So you can see this box when it first appears, it isn't fixed until price eventually bounces off. There. So it's fixed there. And when price comes out and tests it a second time, pending price action, that is when you can actually trade it. So you can see that price actually touches the previous area and then pin bar forms. That's when you can actually trade it. And some people just trade it from zone to zone, or whether it has TPY and 1:1 or any other kind of management, that's completely up to you. Yeah. So the first way that I would actually recommend you to trade it is a retest. Simple, right? That would be the first, second, third touch. So logically, if you trade supply demand zones, you need a model. Depending on how you approach it, I'll actually recommend your stop losses not to be put within this area. Yeah, because if you fully expect price to retest this area, that doesn't make sense for your stop loss to be here, but rather your stop losses to be below. So you can see that price come and touch the previous zone. And it got actually rejected very nicely, and this would be a bearish engulfing bar. All right, so a retouch would be a good way to trade. The second way that I recommend you to trade is waiting for the once price actually forms a supply demand zone, then you can actually consider to trade the higher high or higher low. Sorry, a higher low or lower high. Yeah, that will be the next method that you can actually approach this indicator. So once price actually have a verified area, so verified means that it actually comes down, touch, and move away already. That will be verified. That means this area is verified. Then trade the next higher low. Yeah. So again, pending price actions. You see price goes up, it broke the area, then just wait for a retracement. So that's about it. You can see that this will be a pin bar. Then wait for price to actually break the high again. Then you just wait for a retracement. And then trade the retracement, pending price action again. So this is the only, I mean, personally to me, when I approach this indicator, these are the only two ways where I find it's much more easier to trade. It's not a foolproof method, but it does work well most of the time. See, price continue goes. Again, just trade whether your pin bar or engulfing bar, that should be more than enough. Now, when price comes up, forms an area, and the moment you see a congestion, or some will see as a consolidation, all right, so manually you can actually deem that this area will be your support and resistance. Right, the indicator can actually confirm it. So how to trade this? Now, personally, I'm not a range trader. So usually what I'll do is either I'll wait for price to actually break, retest and go, or goes up, break and go. This is how I will actually approach the market. I'm not sure how some of you will approach it. If the range is really big, you may trade the range. Personally, I just don't do it myself. So let's see how does it turns out. To me, price is now consolidating. Yeah. Maybe there's a break. Maybe there's a break. I'm not sure. There. So this is the break that we'll all be waiting for. Yeah. So again, a retest would be nice. Don't know whether it will happen or not. That's a very nice bar. That it actually goes back up again. But still, there might be a viable, oops, lower high. I don't know. Seems like it does have a lower high. Yeah. So again, I'll repeat, wait for either a retest, trade the lower high or the higher low. Yeah. So these are very basic concept of trading the market. Again, range trading, some of you may have a stomach for it. Personally, I don't. I will avoid range until there's a clear trend that gives me supply and resistance, supply and demand. The double top, double bottom patterns will actually fits the way that I will approach in trading a reversal market. Yeah. So what are your thoughts? How many of you actually uses supply and demand? How many of you actually uses support and resistance? To me, I prefer support and resistance because, frankly speaking, it's just much more versatile. Hey Gary, no, this is not the name of this is an indicator. This is not EA. Yeah. So I guess from the link that you all download, just look for the indicator supply and demand. Yeah. So this one actually has a let me get rid of this. Yeah. So this one is actually a button. You can enable or disable it, which I think is kind of useful. Yeah. And on the top left, you mean this button? This one, this is just to actually switch on and off the indicator. Useful feature. Yeah. So, or you mean the one that I just keep on pressing mix bar? This is actually an EA. Yeah. So this this one is actually I use as part of my back testing. I think you can actually download if you like. Yeah. Here it is. Soft FX. Forex simulator. If you all do use this EA, it doesn't help you trade. This one is just purely a backtesting software. EA, yeah, you will download tick data, so it's going to eat up a lot of space. Okay, yes. Oops, what did I do? So, all right, so this is what I have. What I'm sharing with you today, supply and demand. Now, you can actually consider mixing in this with the last week. What I shared with you is the support and resistance. It does make actually pretty interesting combinations. Yeah. So whenever, let me just give you an example. What I'm trying to say is that just use this. So wherever actually price forms one of the zones already. So in this case, I'll use this. Right. So as per just now, what I've shown you, only after probably 3 or 4 days later, then you see the indicator drawing this supply zones. Cool. Now go down. Once you've seen that, just mark down to the lower time frame. In this case, from D1, I'll go to H4. Trade the next support and resistance. I need to scroll back. There. Yeah, usually, like what I said, the next high or higher low with two. Now, if manually trading, this is what I'll be trading over here. That'll be interesting. Price comes down, higher low. Pending price actions, I can trade it up. Or against, if purely just using indicator, then this is where you'll be able to trade. You see that price. So this area is now being on the daily time frame. You can see that price goes down, up, down, and this is where you can actually start to trade. Yeah. So you can actually combine these two concepts. Yeah. Supply, support and resistance actually appears much more frequently than supply and demand. Yeah. So both can be worked together. Again, I do trade reversals, not as often, probably once every 2 weeks. Yeah. So again, my go-to is still a trend trading approach. That's why you can see that a lot of my examples is still alluring to higher low or lower high. Yeah. To me, at least traditionally, most of my profits are being made in this way of trading. Okay, let me see if there's any questions. I'll be happy to entertain. Oops, get rid of all my annotations. Hi, Shaheen. No, template. I don't have a template per se. Yeah, I just straight away actually drag in all these things. There's no fixed template for me. So again, if you're wondering how what's the settings for it, I didn't really change a lot. I'll just go through what are the different settings that I've gone through. You can actually rewatch this. It might be easier. So this is not what I shared. There. So once you drag it onto your screen, use narrow band. I changed it to true. Yeah. And then rectangle fill, I changed it to true. That's about it. Yeah. So time frame, if you leave it at 0, then it will always be on the time frame that you are with. Yeah. If you want to force in a time frame, then just put it 1440 is a daily time frame. 240 will be 4 hours, 60 will be 1 hour, so and so forth. Yeah, this is actually 1,440 minutes, which is the daily time frame. Yeah, so this is what you have, or rather, this is what you have. Right. So with that, thank you for joining me today. I hope either the support and resistance or the supply and demand indicator will be useful to you. At least it gives you a structured approach to the market. Now, these two indicators will be particularly useful for new traders who does not yet understand how to actually draw this. Yeah. But for seasoned traders, I don't think these two indicators will be particularly useful to you. Coming the next session, that means it will be 2 weeks later, I'll be going back to my usual sharing of different indicators, which I've actually marked up quite a fair bit. As you can see, they're really, really excited to share with you all and some of the backtested results. Right, so Shaheen, indicator. Oh, mine has actually pasted the link right at the top of the chat. Yeah, you can download from my Google Drive. Yeah, so the indicator is actually the supply and demand box. All right, so with that, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you 2 weeks down the road. Goodbye.